Grace stood near her mother's casket, her eyes fixed on the polished wood that now held the woman who had given her life. The autumn wind sent fallen leaves dancing across the cemetery, some landing on the casket like nature's own goodbye gifts. At just 42 years old, Lily Chen had lost her battle with cancer after fighting bravely for nearly 3 years. The disease had slowly stolen her away, leaving behind her husband Tom and their 17-year-old daughter. The sky above was a strange mix of gray and blue, as if the heavens themselves couldn't decide whether to mourn or celebrate Lily's life. Grace pulled her black cardigan tighter around her shoulders, though the chill she felt came more from inside than from the October air. "She looks just like her mother," Grace overheard someone whisper. She didn't turn to see who had spoken. She'd been hearing variations of this comment her whole life. But now the words carried a heavier weight. Would looking like her mother someday mean sharing her fate too? Grace pushed the thought away and focused instead on the wildflowers surrounding the casket, her mother's favorite bluebells and daisies mixed in with the formal funeral arrangements. The ride. Service had been beautiful, if anything about a funeral could be called beautiful. The pastor spoke kindly about Lily's generosity and her passion for teaching kindergarten. Former students, now teenagers, had come to pay their respects, some bringing handmade cards that reminded Grace of the artwork that had once covered their refrigerator. 3 of her mother's closest friends shared stories that made the gathered crowd both laugh and cry. Even in death, Lily had brought people together. As the service ended and people began to disperse, Grace noticed her father sitting alone on a bench beneath an old oak tree, separated from the small clusters of talking mourners. Tom Chen hadn't spoken more than necessary since Lily's passing 3 days ago. At night, Grace would hear him pacing the hallways of their home, sometimes stopping outside her bedroom door as if wanting to check on her but unable to find the words they both needed. Tom sat with his shoulders slumped in defeat, his normally straight posture, a remnant from his military days, completely abandoned. His dark hair, now streaked with early gray at the temples, fell across his forehead, unkempt in a way Lily would have gently teased him about. In his hands, he held her mother's reading glasses, his thumb moving back and forth across the frame, in a hypnotic rhythm. "Would you like some coffee, dear?" Grace's Aunt Patricia touched her elbow gently. "Everyone's heading back to the house now." "In a minute," Grace replied, her eyes still on her father. "I need to check on Dad first." Patricia followed her gaze and nodded in understanding. "Take your time. I'll make sure everything's ready when you both arrive." As her aunt walked away, Grace took a deep breath and made her way across the grass toward her father. Grief had changed him in just 3 short days. The strong man who had taught her to ride a bike, who had built bookshelves for her mother's growing collection of novels, who had always been the family's solid foundation, that man seemed to have vanished, leaving behind a shell Grace barely recognized. "Dad?" she said softly as she approached. Tom looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and unfocused, as if returning from somewhere far away. "Grace," he said, her name coming out rough and unused. "Is it time to go?" "Almost. Aunt Patricia said people are heading back to the house." Grace sat beside him on the bench, leaving a small space between them. Since her mother's diagnosis, physical affection had become awkward between them, as if neither knew how to comfort the other without Lily there to bridge the gap. Together they watched as the funeral staff began their final preparations, readying the casket for its descent into the ground, a moment Tom had requested to happen privately, after everyone else had left. "She loved this cemetery," Tom said suddenly, surprising Grace with the sound of his voice. "Remember how she'd bring her kindergarten class here for nature walks? All those little ones collecting leaves and acorns." Grace nodded. The parents thought she was crazy at first. "Who takes 5-year-olds to a cemetery?" "Your mother did," Tom said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips for just a moment. "She said children should learn that death is just part of life's circle, not something scary to be hidden away." A memory surfaced in Grace's mind, herself at age 6, sitting on this very bench with her mother, making crayon rubbings of interesting tombstones, while Lily explained how the old carved symbols told stories about the people buried there. "She wasn't afraid," Grace whispered more to herself than to her father. No, Tom agreed, slipping the reading glasses into his jacket pocket. She wasn't afraid at the end. I wish I could be that brave. The funeral director approached them with a respectful nod. Mr. Chen, we're ready whenever you are. Tom stood up slowly, like a much older man, and Grace rose beside him. The few remaining mourners said their final goodbyes, leaving with promises of support and casseroles. Soon it was just the two of them, standing side by side as the cemetery. Workers waited at a respectful distance. Should we stay? Grace asked, uncertain of the protocol, wondering what her mother would have wanted. Tom nodded, his eyes fixed on the casket. Just for a moment longer. The workers took this as their cue and began the solemn process of lowering the casket. The mechanical sound of the straps unwinding seemed obscenely loud in the quiet cemetery. Grace felt tears burning behind her eyes again. She had cried so much in the past 3 days that she thought she might have run out of tears. But here, they were again ready to fall. As the casket descended, a strange thing happened. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the wildflowers on top of the casket, so that they seemed to glow with an inner light. At the same moment, a small bird, a bluebird, her mother's favorite, landed on the edge of the grave and tilted its head as if watching the proceedings with curious eyes. Tom made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She always said bluebirds were good luck, he whispered. The bird stayed until the casket reached the bottom of the grave, then flew away toward the setting sun. The workers began moving forward with shovels, but Tom raised his hand. Could you give us a minute? He asked, his voice stronger than it had been all day. When they stepped back, Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He knelt beside the grave and dropped it in. Her favorite poem, he explained to Grace. The one she wanted read at the service, but I couldn't do it. Grace knew the one he meant. A poem about stars and how those we've lost become the lights that guide us home. Her mother had marked it in her poetry book years ago, long before she got sick, with a note in the margin. For when I'm gone. Tom remained kneeling, his hand gripping the edge of the grave as if he might fall in. Grace knelt beside him and placed her hand over his. The house is going to be so empty, he said, his voice breaking on the last word. I know, Grace replied, because there was nothing else to say. No words could fill the void her mother had left behind. They stayed that way as the sun continued its descent, casting long shadows across the cemetery grounds. Other funerals had come and gone throughout the day, other families saying their goodbyes, but now they were alone among the headstones and monuments to lives once lived. Finally, Tom stood, helping Grace to her feet. He nodded to the workers who began their final task. Neither Grace nor her father watched as the first shovelfuls of earth fell onto the casket. Instead, they walked slowly back toward the parking lot, where Tom's truck waited, the only vehicle remaining. Before they reached it, Tom stopped and turned to look back at the gravesite one last time. I don't know how to do this without her, he admitted, the words seeming to be torn from somewhere deep inside him. Grace felt her heart breaking all over again, not just for her mother this time, but for her father too. The strong man who had always been her protector now seemed lost and vulnerable in a way she had never imagined possible. We'll figure it out together, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. As they drove away from the cemetery, Grace looked out the passenger window at the world continuing on as if nothing had changed. People walked there, dogs. Joggers ran along the sidewalks. A group of children played in a nearby park. How strange that the sun still set and the world still turned when her mother no longer breathed the same air. Back at the house, cars lined the street. Inside would be food and sympathy, hushed voices and well-meaning advice. Grace wasn't ready for it, and she suspected her father wasn't either. But they would go in together and face it, because that's what her mother would have wanted. And perhaps somewhere in that crowd of people sharing stories about Lily, they might find some small comfort to carry them through the long night ahead. The week following the funeral passed in a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, and well-meaning visitors who stayed too long, Every morning, Grace would wake up thinking it had all been a terrible dream, only to remember the truth when she passed her mother's empty bedroom on the way to the bathroom. The door remained closed most days. Her father couldn't bear to sleep there yet, choosing instead the living room couch where he would doze fitfully between late-night reruns of old westerns. By Wednesday, the stream of visitors had slowed to a trickle. Aunt Patricia still came by daily, bringing fresh groceries and checking on them both with worried eyes. Grace's best friend Jenna dropped off homework assignments and class notes, though Grace hadn't looked at them yet. The school had given her 2 weeks off, but the thought of returning to normal life seemed impossible, like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Grace stood at the kitchen sink, washing the same plate she'd been scrubbing for several minutes, her mind somewhere else entirely. Through the window, she could see her father in the backyard, kneeling in her mother's garden. He'd been out there since sunrise, weeding and pruning with a careful attention that surprised her. Tom had never been much of a gardener before. That had been Lily's domain, the place where she spent weekend mornings with dirt-smudged knees and a wide-brimmed hat protecting her from the sun. Drying her hands on a kitchen towel, Grace decided to join him. The October air was cool, but pleasant as she stepped onto the back porch. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her slippers as she made her way across the lawn toward the garden beds that lined the back fence. Her father didn't look up as she approached, focused intently on a cluster of mums that had been her mother's pride and joy. "Need any help?" Grace asked, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet yard. Tom glanced up, squinting against the afternoon sun. His face looked thinner than it had a week ago, new lines etched around his eyes and mouth. "These mums needed deadheading," he said, gesturing to the flowers. "Your mom would have been after me to do it days ago." Grace knelt beside him, the damp earth soaking through the knees of her jeans. She didn't mind. "I didn't know you knew how to garden," she said, accepting the small pruning shears he handed her. "I don't. Not really." Tom gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But I watched her enough times. She used to talk while she worked, explaining every step like I was one of her kindergarten students." He paused, running his fingers gently over a bright orange bloom. "I never really listened. Now I wish I had." They worked side by side as the sun drifted across the sky. Grace followed her father's lead, snipping dead flowers and pulling tiny weeds from between the plants. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence felt different than it had in the days before. Less heavy somehow, as if the simple act of working together had eased something between them. "Your mom planted these bulbs last fall," Tom said after a while, pointing to a patch of soil near the fence. "She said they'd be a surprise come spring. I can't remember what they were." "Daffodils," Grace replied. "Yellow ones. She showed me the package before she planted them." Tom nodded, a flash of something like gratitude crossing his face. "We should mark the spot. Make sure we don't dig them up by accident." Grace found some small stones and arranged them in a circle around the area where the bulbs slept beneath, the soil. As she placed the last stone, she noticed her father watching her, his eyes softer than they had been since the hospital. "You have her hands," he said quietly. "The same way of touching things, like everything is alive and feeling." Grace looked down at her dirt-streaked fingers, never having thought about such a thing before. "Really?" Tom nodded. She always said, gardening wasn't about controlling nature, but having a conversation with it. He shook his head with a small, sad laugh. "I never understood what she meant by that. Maybe I'm starting to." As the afternoon light began to fade, they gathered their tools and headed back toward the house. Grace noticed her father's wedding ring catching the last rays of sunset, the gold band gleaming against his soil-darkened hand. It was the same ring her mother had slipped onto his finger 20 years ago, in a small ceremony by the lake where they'd first met. Grace had seen the photos dozens of times, her mother in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair, her father looking impossibly young and nervous in his borrowed suit. Inside, they washed up in the kitchen sink, their shoulders nearly touching as they scrubbed dirt from beneath their fingernails. It was the closest they'd stood to each other since the funeral. "I could make some dinner," Grace offered, opening the refrigerator to survey the collection of casseroles and pasta dishes that well-meaning neighbors had dropped off. We still have Mrs. Patel's lasagna, or that chicken thing from Mom's book club. I'm not very hungry, Tom said, drying his hands on a dish towel. His eyes drifted to the kitchen table where a stack of mail had been accumulating. Bills and sympathy cards mostly, all unopened. Adult responsibilities waiting for attention that neither of them had the energy to give. But you should eat something. Grace nodded, though her own appetite had been nearly non-existent since her mother's death. She pulled out the lasagna anyway and cut 2 small portions, knowing they both needed to at least try. As she waited for the microwave to heat the food, she noticed her father standing in front of the refrigerator door, staring at a photo held there by a magnet shaped like a ladybug, one of her mother's many whimsical touches around the house. The photo showed the 3 of them at the beach last summer, before the cancer had returned for the final time. Lily stood between them, arms wrapped around their waists, her smile wide and uninhibited by pain or worry. It was one of the last truly good days they'd had together. We should put together a photo album, Grace said, the idea coming to her, suddenly. Mom was always saying she wanted to organize all our pictures properly. Tom continued to stare at the photo, his finger lightly tracing the outline of his wife's face. That would be nice, he said finally. Maybe this weekend. They ate in near silence at the kitchen table, the television murmuring quietly from the living room where one of her mother's favorite cooking shows was playing. Neither of them had the heart to change the channel or turn it off. It was one of many small ways they kept her presence in the house. The cooking shows she'd loved, her reading glasses still on the bedside table, her gardening hat hanging on its hook by the back door. After dinner, Grace retreated to her room, leaving her father staring blankly at paperwork from the funeral home. She needed to be alone, to process the strange mix of grief and comfort that the day in the garden had brought. Her bedroom was exactly as it had been before her mother's death. Posters of her favorite bands on the walls, stacks of books on the nightstand, the same purple bedspread she'd had since middle school. But it felt different now, as if the very air inside had changed. She lay on her bed, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, ignoring the text messages from friends who didn't know what to say but felt obligated to try. Only Jenna's messages brought any comfort. Short, simple check-ins without the awkward platitudes others offered. As night fell completely, Grace changed into her pajamas and crawled under the covers, though she knew sleep would be elusive. She hadn't slept well since her mother died, drifting in and out of dreams where Lily was still alive, still sitting at the kitchen table with her morning coffee, still calling up the stairs to hurry or they'd be late. Tonight was no different. Grace tossed and turned, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of settling floorboards, her father's footsteps as he paced the hallway. Around midnight, she heard him stop outside her door, lingering there as he had each night since the funeral, neither entering nor walking away. "Dad?" she called softly. "You can come in." The door opened slowly, revealing Tom's silhouette against the dim hall light. "Sorry," he said. "Did I wake you?" Grace shook her head, sitting up against her pillows. "I wasn't asleep." He hesitated in the doorway. "I just wanted to check on you. Your mom would always—" "I know," Grace said, saving him from having to finish the thought. Lily had always been the one to check on Grace before bed, to smooth her hair and leave a kiss on her forehead, even long after Grace had insisted she was too old for such things. Tom nodded, starting to retreat, but Grace spoke again. "I had a dream about Mom last night." He paused, one hand still on the doorknob. "What was it about?" "She was trying to tell me something," Grace said, remembering the fragments that had stayed with her upon waking. She kept pointing to her dresser drawers, saying there was something important inside. But when I looked, they were empty. Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Dreams are strange that way." "Do you dream about her?" Grace asked. Her father came further into the room, perching awkwardly on the edge of her bed. In the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains, she could see the exhaustion in the slump of his shoulders. "Every night," he admitted. "But in my dreams, I can never reach her. She's always just ahead of me, turning a corner or closing a door. I keep calling her name, but she doesn't hear me." Grace felt tears threatening again. "That sounds awful." "It is," Tom said simply. "But at least I get to see her, even if it's not real." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Tom stood. "Try to get some sleep," he said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. As he reached the door, Grace called after him. The garden looked better today. Mom would be happy. Tom paused, his back to her. "Good night, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. After he left, Grace lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin. Outside her window, clouds drifted across the moon, casting shifting shadows on her wall. As she finally drifted toward sleep, she could have sworn she smelled her mother's favorite perfume. Just a hint of jasmine in the night air, there and gone in an instant. In her dreams that night, her mother was smiling, holding something in her hands that she wanted Grace to see. 2 weeks after the funeral, Grace found herself standing in her parents' bedroom for the first time since her mother died. She hadn't planned to go in there today, or any day soon, really, but her dream from the night before had followed her into waking. Once again, her mother had appeared, pointing toward her dresser with an urgency that left Grace breathless when she woke. This time, the dream had been so vivid that Grace could almost hear her mother's voice. "Look inside, sweetie. I left something for you both." The bedroom was exactly as Lily had left it. The bed was still made with the blue and white quilt her grandmother had sewn as a wedding gift. Her mother's reading glasses still lay on the nightstand next to a dog-eared paperback. The curtains were drawn halfway, letting in strips of late-morning sunlight that illuminated dancing dust particles in the air. Grace stood in the doorway for several long moments, gathering courage. It felt like trespassing somehow, stepping into this space that had been her parents' private world. Her father still couldn't bring himself to sleep here, though he came in sometimes to get clean clothes before retreating back to the couch that had become his temporary bed. "Mom," Grace whispered, "if you're trying to tell me something, I hope I'm not imagining it." Taking a deep breath, she crossed to her mother's dresser, an antique cherry wood piece that had been in the family for generations. The top was arranged with her mother's things: a jewelry box, bottles of lotion and perfume, a small dish that held her wedding rings during the last months when her fingers had grown too thin to keep them on. Grace opened the top drawer first. Inside were neatly folded scarves and handkerchiefs, arranged by color in a way that was so typically her mother that Grace's throat tightened. She ran her fingers lightly over the soft fabrics, remembering how her mother had always had a scarf that matched every outfit. The second drawer held sweaters, and the third contained Lily's favorite t-shirts, including the faded university shirt she'd worn on weekend mornings. Grace lifted it to her face, inhaling deeply, hoping to catch her mother's scent, but it just smelled like clean laundry. Somehow, that small disappointment brought fresh tears to her eyes. She was about to close the drawer when she noticed something didn't look right about the bottom of it. The drawer seemed shallower than it should be. Grace removed the neatly folded shirts and ran her hand along the bottom. There was definitely something off. A part of the wood felt different from the rest. Carefully, she pressed down on different spots until she felt a subtle give on one side. With gentle pressure, a section of the false bottom lifted, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. "Oh my God," Grace whispered, her heart racing. Inside the compartment was a small wooden box and several envelopes tied together with a blue ribbon. With trembling hands, Grace lifted them out and carried them to the bed, sitting on the edge of her mother's side as she untied the ribbon. The envelopes were addressed in her mother's distinctive handwriting, some to Tom, some to Grace, and some to "my family." Each one was dated with dates spanning the next 5 years. The first envelope, marked with tomorrow's date, was addressed to "Tom, on your birthday." Grace stared at it in shock. Tomorrow was indeed her father's birthday. the first one he would celebrate without his wife. In the chaos of grief, she had almost forgotten. The wooden box was locked, with a small key taped to its bottom. Inside were more envelopes, a USB drive, and several small wrapped packages with dates written on them. "Grace, are you in there?" Her father's voice startled her. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway, a basket of clean laundry in his hands. He looked surprised to find her there, and his eyes quickly fell to the items spread across the bed. "What's all that?" he asked, setting down the laundry basket and coming closer. "I found it in Mom's dresser," Grace explained, her voice unsteady. "There was a hidden compartment. I think she left these for us." Tom sat heavily on the bed beside her, his face a mixture of confusion and wonder. "How did you know to look there?" Grace hesitated, not sure if she should tell him about the dreams. It sounded crazy even to her own ears. "Just a feeling," she said finally. "I had a dream about Mom last night." She kept pointing to her dresser. To her surprise, her father didn't question this. He simply nodded, as if such a thing made perfect sense. "Your mother always said you two had a special connection." He picked up the envelope marked with his name and tomorrow's date, turning it over in his hands. She planned this. Even when she knew she was running out of time, she was thinking about how to take care of us. Grace watched as her father's fingers traced his name in Lily's handwriting. His eyes filled with tears, but for the first time since her mother's death, they didn't seem like tears of only pain. There was something else there too, a spark of something that might, someday, grow into comfort. "Should we open it?" Grace asked, nodding toward the envelope. Tom shook his head. "It says tomorrow. Your mother was always very specific about these things." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Remember how she would hide our Christmas presents and refuse to let us open them even a minute before Christmas morning?" Grace smiled too, the memory warm and sweet. She used to say anticipation was half the gift. "Then we'll wait until tomorrow," Tom decided, carefully setting the envelope on the nightstand. "But maybe we should look through the rest, see if there's anything else we need to know about." Together they examined the contents of the wooden box. Most of the envelopes were sealed and dated for future occasions. Grace's 18th birthday, the anniversary of Tom and Lily's first date, Grace's high school graduation. But one envelope was marked simply, "Read first" in Lily's neat script. Tom opened it with careful fingers, unfolding a single sheet of paper covered in Lily's handwriting. "My dearest loves," he read aloud, his voice steady despite the emotion, written clearly on his face. "If you're reading this, it means I've had to leave you much sooner than any of us wanted. I'm so sorry for that. There are 1,000 things I still wanted to do with you, 1,000,000 more memories I wanted to make. But life doesn't always give us the time we think we deserve." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I've been preparing these letters and gifts for a while now, ever since the doctors told me the cancer had spread. At first I was angry, at my body, at fate, at the unfairness of it all. But then I realized that instead of focusing on what I was losing, I could spend my remaining energy leaving pieces of myself behind for the two people I love most in this world. In these envelopes you'll find messages for special days, advice I wish I could give in person, and memories I want to make sure you never forget. The USB drive contains videos I've recorded, some silly, some serious, but all made with so much love my heart could barely contain it. Please follow the dates on the envelopes. I've timed them for when I think you might need them most. And please remember that even though I'm not physically there with you, my love remains. It's in the garden I tended, the recipes I taught you, Grace, the way the sunlight hits the kitchen table on winter mornings. It's in the sound of your laugh, Tom, and in the strength of your hands. My first special message is for tomorrow, Tom's birthday. There's something waiting for you both at our special place. You'll know where to look. All my love, forever and always, Lily." The room fell silent when Tom finished reading. Grace felt tears rolling down her cheeks, but they weren't the same tears she'd been crying for weeks. These felt different, like the kind that cleanse rather than drown. Our special place. Tom repeated quietly. She means the lake, where we met, where we got married. Grace nodded. The lake was about 2 hours away, a state park with hiking, trails and picnic areas where her parents had first bumped into each other 23 years ago. Her mother had been birdwatching, her father had been fishing, and a sudden rainstorm had driven them both to seek shelter in the same small wooden gazebo. At least, that's how the story had always been told, one of those family legends repeated, so often it had taken on the quality of myth. She wants us to go there tomorrow? Grace asked. I think so. Tom carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. She said we'd know where to look. The oak tree, Grace said immediately. Her mother had shown her the massive oak tree where her father had proposed, had even taken her there on her parents' anniversary each year for a picnic. Remember how she always said that tree was special? That it had witnessed all the important moments of your lives together? Tom's eyes widened with recognition. You're right, that has to be it. He glanced at the clock on the bedside table. We should get an early start tomorrow. It's a long drive. That night, for the first time since her mother died, Grace heard her father moving things in the master bedroom. The sounds of drawers opening and closing, footsteps crossing the hardwood floor. When she peeked in, she saw him carefully placing the wooden box and envelopes on Lily's vanity, arranging them with the same care her mother would have used. I think I'll try to sleep in here tonight, he said when he noticed Grace watching. His voice was uncertain, as if he was asking permission. I think Mom would like that, Grace said softly. Later, as she lay in her own bed, Grace felt something shift in the house, as if a window had been opened, letting in fresh air after weeks of stillness. Tomorrow they would drive to the lake and discover whatever gift her mother had left for them there. The thought filled her with both nervousness and anticipation. Just before sleep claimed her, Grace whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Mom, for not really leaving us after all." In her dreams that night, her mother appeared again, but this time she wasn't trying to show Grace anything. She was simply smiling, a look of peace on her face that Grace hadn't seen since before the cancer took hold. The morning of Tom's birthday dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect fall day that Lily had always loved. Grace woke early, her sleep interrupted by excitement and nervousness about what they might find at the lake. She lay in bed for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the house, half expecting to hear her mother in the kitchen making birthday pancakes as she had every year for as long as Grace could remember. Instead, she heard her father's footsteps moving around downstairs, the coffee maker gurgling to life. Grace got up and dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a warm sweater before heading to the kitchen. To her surprise, she found her father standing at the stove, spatula in hand, attempting to flip a misshapen pancake. A small pile of slightly burned ones sat on a plate nearby. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said, pausing in the doorway. Tom looked up, a flicker of embarrassment crossing his face. "I thought I'd try to make breakfast," he explained. "Your mom always made pancakes for birthdays." He gestured ruefully at his cooking attempts. "I don't think I'm doing it right." Grace stepped forward, taking the spatula from his hand. "Let me help. Mom showed me her trick." She adjusted the heat on the stove and added a pat of butter to the pan. "The first batch never turns out well anyway," that's what she always said. Together they made a stack of pancakes that, while not as perfect as Lily's had been, were at least golden brown and mostly round. They sat at the kitchen table to eat, both acutely aware of the empty chair where Lily should have been. "Have you opened your birthday envelope yet?" Grace asked, passing the maple syrup. Tom shook his head. "I was waiting for you." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the envelope they had found yesterday. For a moment he just held it, staring at his name written in his wife's handwriting. "Do you want me to leave you alone to read it?" Grace offered. "No," Tom said quickly. "Stay, please." He carefully opened the envelope, sliding his finger under the seal as if afraid to tear even a small piece of the paper his wife had touched. Inside was a birthday card with a painting of a lake at sunrise on the front, eerily similar to the lake they would be visiting today. Tom opened it, and a small key fell out onto the table. "My dearest Tom," he read aloud, his voice slightly unsteady. "Happy birthday, my love. 52 years on this earth, and I've been lucky enough to share 20 of them with you. I'm so sorry I can't be there today to see the way the morning light brings out the silver in your hair, or to tease you about being an old man when we both know you can still outrun half the deputies at the station. By now, you and Grace have found my letters and gifts. I hope they bring you some comfort, though I know nothing can fill the gap I've left behind. Today, I need you to go to our oak tree at the lake. Remember the spot where you proposed? Where we picnicked every year on our anniversary? There's something waiting for you both there. The key that came with this letter will open a small metal box buried beneath the largest root on the north side of the tree. You'll need a shovel to dig it up. It's not deep, but I wanted to make sure it would be safe from rain and animals until you found it. I know this first birthday without me will be hard. Birthdays are supposed to be happy, and right now happiness might feel impossible. But please try, for me. Take Grace to that little ice cream shop in town after you visit the lake. Get the butter pecan. I know it's your favorite, even though you always let me pick the flavors. And remember, a part of me will always be with you, in the memories we made and in the love we shared. I'll see you again someday, but until then, live well and fully. That would be the best gift you could give me. All my love, today and always, Lily. Tom lowered the card, his eyes wet but his face more peaceful than Grace had seen it since her mother's diagnosis. He picked up the small key, examining it closely. She always was a planner, he said quietly. Even at the end, when she was so tired she was thinking ahead, making sure we'd be okay. Grace reached across the table, placing her hand over his. We should get going. It's a long drive. An hour later, they were on the road. Tom behind the wheel of his pickup truck, Grace in the passenger seat with a small shovel borrowed from the garden shed resting across her knees. They had also packed a lunch, sandwiches and thermoses of hot chocolate, because Lily would have insisted on a proper picnic. The drive passed mostly in silence, with occasional comments about the changing leaves or memories of previous trips to the lake. The further they got from town, the more vibrant the fall colors became, deep reds and bright oranges painting the hillsides like flames. Your mom and I were going to take a trip this fall, Tom said suddenly, as they turned onto the winding road that led to the state park. Drive up the coast to see the lighthouses. She always wanted to do that. Maybe we could still go, Grace suggested. Over my winter break, maybe. Tom glanced at her, surprise and something like hope flickering across his face. Maybe, he agreed. She'd like that. The parking lot at Lakeside State Park was nearly empty on a weekday morning in late October. Just a few cars were scattered across the vast asphalt expanse, likely hikers taking advantage of the perfect weather before winter set in. Tom parked near the trailhead that would lead them to the oak tree. Do you remember the way? He asked. As they got out of the truck, Grace nodded. Mom brought me here every year, remember? For your anniversary picnics. She hoisted the small backpack containing their lunch and the shovel. It's about a 20-minute walk from here. The trail was carpeted with fallen leaves that crunched pleasantly beneath their feet. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dappled patterns on the path ahead. The air smelled of earth and decaying leaves, a rich, sweet scent that reminded Grace of childhood hikes with her parents. Your mother was birdwatching the day we met, Tom said as they walked. Did she ever tell you that she had her binoculars trained right on me for a good 5 minutes before I noticed her? Grace smiled. She said she was watching a rare woodpecker. That's what she told me too, Tom chuckled. But years later she admitted there was no woodpecker. She just thought I was cute. Mom? Bold like that? Grace found it hard to imagine her quiet, bookish mother being so forward. Oh, your mom had a wild streak when she was younger, Tom said, his eyes distant with memory. Everyone saw the kindergarten teacher, but I knew the woman who once drove all night just to see the sunrise over the ocean, who convinced me to go, skinny dipping in this very lake on our second date. Grace covered her ears in mock horror. Too much information, Dad. They both laughed, the sound startling a pair of squirrels that scampered up a nearby tree. It felt good to laugh, almost forbidden in the face of their grief, but right somehow too. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the trees opened up to reveal the lake. its surface a perfect mirror reflecting the blue sky and colorful trees surrounding it. And there, standing alone on a small rise overlooking the water, was the oak tree. Even from a distance it was unmistakable, massive and ancient, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like arthritic fingers. "There it is," Grace said unnecessarily, her pace quickening. The oak tree was even bigger up close, its trunk so wide that it would take 3 people holding hands to encircle it. Exposed roots snaked across the ground like wooden rivers, creating natural seats and footrests. A carpet of acorns surrounded the base, crunching under their shoes as they approached. "North side," Tom murmured, looking around to orient himself. "That would be this way." He walked around the trunk, Grace following close behind. On the north side of the tree, facing away from the lake, one massive root rose above the others, creating an arch before diving back into the soil. Tom knelt beside it, running his hand along the rough bark. "This must be it," he said. "Hand me the shovel." Grace passed him the garden shovel, and Tom began to dig carefully next to the root. The earth was soft from recent rain, and it wasn't. Long before the shovel struck something solid with a dull thunk. "Found something," Tom said, setting aside the shovel and using his hands to clear away the remaining dirt. A small metal box about the size of a hardcover book emerged from the soil. It was made of tarnished copper, with a simple latch and keyhole on the front. Tom brushed off the last bits of dirt and held the box in his lap, staring at it as if unsure what to do next. "The key," Grace reminded him gently. Tom pulled Lily's birthday card from his jacket pocket, retrieving the small key that had been enclosed. With slightly trembling hands, he inserted it into the lock and turned. The latch clicked open and he slowly raised the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark blue velvet, was a time capsule of their family history. A stack of letters tied with ribbon. A flash drive. Small trinkets that might have seemed worthless to anyone else. A smooth river stone. A pressed flower. A child's drawing faded with age. And on top, a folded piece of paper marked "Open First." Tom unfolded the paper, holding it so Grace could read along with him. "My beloveds," Lily had written, "if you're reading this, you've followed my breadcrumbs to our special place. This box contains memories from our life together, the important moments that shaped us as a family. Some are from the past, like the first Valentine's card Tom ever gave me and Grace's kindergarten drawing of our family. But I've also included something for your future. The flash drive contains video messages I've recorded for both of you, some for specific dates and occasions, others just to say I love you when you might need to hear it most. I started making them when the doctors told me the cancer had returned. I didn't want to leave you without a way to still see me, hear me, remember what we had together. Watch the first video today, together. The others are labeled with dates or events when I think you might need them. My voice, my face, my love, all preserved for you when I no longer can be. Remember that love doesn't end with death. It changes form, becomes something new, but it never disappears. Look for me in the sunrise, in the garden, in the way Grace tosses her hair just like I always did. I am still with you even when you can't see me. All my love, Lily." Grace wiped tears from her cheeks as her father carefully folded the note and placed it back in the box. He lifted out the flash drive, a small black rectangle that somehow contained her mother's face, her voice, her last messages to them. "Should we watch it now?" Grace asked, looking around. "We could use my laptop in the car." Tom shook his head. "Let's have our picnic first. Here, under the tree. Your mom would want us to enjoy this beautiful day." He managed a smile that, while tinged with sadness, was genuine. "Then we'll watch it together." They spread their lunch on a blanket beneath the oak's spreading branches. As they ate, Tom told stories about his and Lily's early days together, stories Grace had never heard before. How nervous he'd been when he proposed in this very spot. How they'd carved their initials somewhere high in the branches where no one but the birds would see them. After lunch, they carefully repacked the metal box, except for the flash drive, which Tom tucked safely in his shirt pocket next to his heart. As they were preparing to leave, Grace noticed a butterfly land on the trunk of the oak tree, a monarch with brilliant orange wings. Look, Dad, she said, pointing. Mom loved monarchs. Tom looked up, his expression softening. She did. She used to say they reminded her that even the most delicate things can make incredible journeys. The butterfly remained on the tree as they gathered their things, its wings opening and closing slowly, like it was breathing with them. Just before they turned to go, it took flight, circling around them once before heading toward the lake. Come on, Tom said, taking Grace's hand like he used to when she was little. Let's go see what your mom has to say to us. The drive back from the lake was different somehow, lighter, despite the precious metal box now sitting on the back seat of Tom's truck. Grace watched the countryside roll by, thinking about the flash drive in her father's pocket and the videos her mother had made for them. Part of her couldn't wait to see her mom's face again, to hear her voice. Another part was nervous, afraid that seeing Lily alive on screen might reopen the wound of losing her. Are you okay? Tom asked, glancing over at her. Grace nodded. Just thinking about Mom's videos. Me too, Tom admitted. It's like she knew exactly what we would need. When they arrived home in the late afternoon, they moved with purpose, as if following an unspoken plan. Tom carried the copper box to the living room while Grace set up her laptop on the coffee table. They sat side by side on the couch, the same couch where Tom had been sleeping since Lily died, now transformed into a different kind of space. Tom pulled the flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Grace. She turned it over in her palm, marveling at how something so small could hold such precious cargo. With a deep breath, she plugged it into her laptop. A folder opened automatically, revealing dozens of video files, each labeled with a date or occasion. Grace's graduation, Tom's retirement, first Christmas, when you miss me most. Among them was one simply titled, Watch First, Birthday. Grace looked at her father. Ready? Tom nodded, reaching for her hand as she clicked on the file. The screen flickered, and suddenly, there was Lily. She sat in the garden, surrounded by her beloved flowers, sunlight playing across her face. Unlike the gaunt figure she had become in her final days, this Lily looked healthy, her cheeks full, her eyes bright. She must have recorded this months ago, before the cancer had taken its final toll. Happy birthday, my love. Lily began, smiling, directly at the camera. And hello to you too, Grace. If you're watching this, then you found my little treasure hunt. I always did love surprises. Tom's hand tightened around Grace's. I wanted to record these messages for you both because there's so much I still want to share with you. So many moments I wish I could be part of, Lily continued. I know it won't be the same as having me there, but I hope it helps a little, to see me and hear my voice when you're missing me most. She shifted slightly, adjusting her position in the garden chair. Behind her, butterflies danced among the flowers. Tom, my darling, happy 52nd birthday. I wish I could be there to make you pancakes and tease you about those gray hairs. You keep pretending not to notice. Her smile was gentle, teasing. By now you've probably tried to make the pancakes yourself. I hope they weren't too burned. Tom let out a choked laugh. She knew me so well, he whispered. I've been thinking about what I want to say to you both. Lily continued. What wisdom I can share, what comfort I can offer. The truth is, I'm still figuring it out myself. This leaving, this letting go. She looked down briefly, composing herself, then looked back up with determination in her eyes. But here's what I do know. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. All that love you feel for me. That doesn't disappear just because I'm not physically there to receive it. It's still real, still powerful. You just need to find new channels for it. She paused, reaching for something off camera, then held up a small potted plant. See this? It's a cutting from my favorite rose bush. By the time you watch this, I'll have planted it in the garden. When you miss me most, go sit with it. Talk to me there. Watch it grow and bloom, and remember that even when things seem dead, new life is often just waiting for the right moment to emerge. Grace remembered the rose bush. Just a small, seemingly lifeless stick when her mother had planted it 2 months before she died. It had bloomed for the first time the week after the funeral. A single perfect pink blossom that neither She nor her father had had the heart to cut. "I've left you other messages for specific times," Lily continued. "Watch them when you're ready. No rush. Some might be too painful right now, and that's okay. Grief doesn't follow a timetable or a neat little roadmap. It's messy and unpredictable, and completely normal." She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes intense. "But I need you both to promise me something. Don't use your love for me as a reason to stop living. Don't lock your hearts away because it hurts. The pain you feel now is the price of the love we shared, and I'd pay it 1,000 times over to have had the life we built together." Lily sat back, a soft smile returning to her face. "Now, I'm betting you went to the lake today, found the box, and are watching this together on the couch in the living room. Am I right?" Grace and Tom exchanged startled glances. "See? Still got it," Lily laughed. "I want you to do something for me now. Go to the kitchen, to the drawer where we keep the takeout menus. Look behind them. There's an envelope taped to the back of the drawer. Go get it, then come back and continue playing this video." The video paused automatically, as if Lily had engineered even this detail. How did she know we'd watch it here? Grace wondered aloud. "Your mother was always a few steps ahead of everyone else," Tom said, standing up. "Let's see what she left us." They went to the kitchen together, pulled open the takeout menu drawer, and sure enough, taped to the back was a white envelope with "For my love's birthday" written on it in Lily's handwriting. Back on the couch, Tom carefully opened the sun envelope. Inside was a gift card to their favorite Italian restaurant, the place they had gone for every special occasion as a family, and a note that read, "Have dinner together tonight. Order the tiramisu for dessert. Tell stories about me that make you laugh, not cry." Tom brushed away tears as Grace resumed the video. "Found it?" Lily asked from the screen, as if she could see them nodding. "Good. Life is meant to be lived, my loves, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Go have a nice dinner, just the two of you. Start a new tradition for Tom's birthday." She took a deep breath, her expression growing more serious. "There's something else I need to tell you. Something important." Both Grace and Tom leaned forward unconsciously. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happens after we die," Lily said. "Different faiths have different beliefs, and I don't claim to know the absolute truth. But I believe with all my heart that love doesn't end with death. The connection between souls, between hearts that truly know each other, that doesn't just disappear." She touched her chest, right over her heart. "I will find ways to let you know I'm still with you. It might be something small, a favorite song on the radio at just the right moment, a butterfly landing nearby, a sudden memory so vivid it takes your breath away. Pay attention to these moments. They're not coincidences." Lily smiled, a radiant expression that seemed to light her from within. "And sometimes, if you're very quiet and your hearts are very open, you might sense me more directly. In those moments between sleep and waking, in the garden at dusk, in the quiet moments when grief feels most overwhelming. I'll be there. I promise." She blew a kiss to the camera. "I love you both beyond words, beyond time, beyond this physical separation. Be good to each other, be patient with your grief, and know that I am never truly gone." The screen went dark for a moment. Then Lily reappeared, this time inside their home, sitting at the kitchen table. "One last thing," she said with a mischievous smile. "Tom, your anniversary gift from last year, the one you thought you lost, it's in your sock drawer, in the back corner under your winter socks. You didn't lose it. I was hiding it because you almost found it before our anniversary." Tom let out a surprised laugh. "I've been looking for that watch for months." "And Grace," Lily continued, "in the wooden box from the oak tree, there's a small velvet pouch at the very bottom. Inside is my mother's locket, the one you always admired. It's yours now. Inside, I've put a tiny picture of the three of us, from last Christmas. Wear it when you need to feel me close." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but her smile remained steady. "I have to go now. But remember, this isn't goodbye. It's just, see you later. In unexpected moments, in quiet whispers, in the love you continue to share with each other. I'll be there. Always." With one final smile, the video ended, leaving Grace and Tom sitting in silence, tears streaming down both their faces. "I need to go to the cemetery," Tom said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "Right now, I need to, I don't know, talk to her, thank her." Grace understood immediately. "I'll come with you." 30 minutes later, they stood together at Lily's grave. 1 month had passed since the funeral, but the ground was still bare, the headstone newly installed. Tom had brought the pink rose that had bloomed in their garden, cutting it carefully to place in the small vase attached to the headstone. As the setting sun painted the cemetery in golden light, Grace wrapped her arms around her father in a tight embrace. For the first time since her mother's death, it didn't feel like they were two broken people clinging to each other for survival. There was strength in their embrace and something else. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. As they stood there, arms around each other, the strangest thing happened. A warm breeze swirled around them, carrying the unmistakable scent of Lily's favorite jasmine perfume. Grace felt goosebumps rise on her arms despite the warmth of the evening. At the same moment, a butterfly with wings the exact shade of her mother's eyes landed on the headstone, resting there as if watching them. "Dad," she whispered. "Do you smell that?" Tom nodded, his eyes wide. "Jasmine, your mom's perfume." The breeze encircled them again, and with it came an almost imperceptible pressure against their backs, like a third arm joining their embrace. Not physically present, but undeniably there. The sensation was so distinct that they both turned, expecting to see someone standing behind them. There was no one there, at least no one visible to ordinary eyes. But the butterfly took flight, circling them 3 times before landing on Grace's shoulder for the briefest moment. "Mom?" Grace breathed, hardly daring to believe. Just then the clouds parted and a single ray of sunlight broke through, creating a perfect rainbow that arched directly over Lily's grave. It was so vivid, so perfectly positioned, that it couldn't possibly be coincidence. Later, when they developed the photos Grace had taken with her phone, they would be stunned to see a faint, luminous outline embracing them both in several of the images. The unmistakable silhouette of Lily, her face peaceful and smiling. But in that moment, standing in the cemetery with the scent of jasmine surrounding them, they didn't need physical proof. They felt her presence with absolute certainty, as tangible and real as the ground beneath their feet. The miracle wasn't that Lily had returned from death. It was that she had never truly left. Through her carefully planned messages and the inexplicable signs that could not be dismissed as mere coincidence, she had given them the greatest gift, the certainty that love transcends even death itself. As they walked hand in hand back to the car, Grace felt a lightness in her heart that she hadn't experienced since before her mother's diagnosis. The grief was still there, and would be for a long time to come. But alongside it now was something else, a quiet knowing, a peaceful certainty that the bonds between them all remained unbroken. "Come on, Dad," she said softly. "Let's go get that Italian food Mom ordered for us, and definitely tiramisu." Tom smiled, his eyes still wet but now shining with something beyond tears. She always did know exactly what we needed. Above them, the rainbow lingered long after the rain clouds had passed, a bridge between earth and sky, between what was lost and what remained, between grief and the slow, gentle unfurling of hope.